From Kobe Bryant's 81-point outburst against the Toronto Raptors to Bill Russell grabbing 40 rebounds in a single game. Today we're going to be going over some of the best games of all time from NBA legends. Wilt Chamberlain was one of the most dominant players of all time. He was a generational athlete and had the advantage of playing in an era where competition was far less skilled than the average player was that we see today. Chamberlain was the third overall pick of the 1959 NBA draft by the Philadelphia Warriors. He spent 14 years in the league and in that time made 13 All-Star games, 10 All-NBA teams, 2 All-Defensive teams, 4 MVPs, 2 NBA titles, 1 Finals MVP, won the 1959-60 Rookie of the Year award, led the league in assists once, rebounds 11 times, and scoring 7 times. He would be inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1979. Chamberlain's elite skill set put him head and shoulders above the rest of the league at the time. In particular, his scoring ability out of the post, paired with his height of 7'1", made him almost impossible to stop. This would be put on full display on March 2nd, 1962, in a game between the Philadelphia Warriors and the New York Knicks. Chamberlain would finish the game with an NBA record-setting 100 points. This is a record that still stands today and one that is likely to never be broken again. He finished the game shooting 36 for 63 from the field and 28 for 32 from the free throw line. To make this performance even more impressive, Chamberlain accomplished this insurmountable feat without the luxury of having a three-point line. However, while he was not able to shoot any three-pointers in this game, Chamberlain did have both teams aiding in him reaching this historic milestone. Once Wilt's point total reached a certain mark, his teammates would begin fouling the Knicks, so Chamberlain would have more time to go to work on the offensive side of the ball. Along with this, when it became clear that the Knicks would not have a chance of winning the game, they would begin to foul Chamberlain so he would be able to earn his points from the free throw line. This is the reason behind him finishing the contest with 32 free throw attempts. Up next is another mind-blowing scoring performance from one of the best scorers that the game has ever seen. Kobe Bryant was one of the best scorers to ever suit up in an NBA game. At the time of his retirement, he ranked third on the all-time scorers list. He was the 13th pick in the 1996 NBA draft by the Charlotte Hornets. In his 20 years in the league, he would make the All-Star game 18 times, the All-NBA team 15 times, the All-Defensive team 12 times. Along with this, he would win 5 NBA titles, 2 Finals MVPs, 1 MVP award, and led the league in scoring twice. On January 22, 2006, Bryant would have arguably the most awe-inspiring performance of his entire career. The Los Angeles Lakers would take on the Toronto Raptors, and Kobe would end up torching the entire Toronto roster. He would finish the game with an incredible 81 points while shooting 28 for 46 from the field, 7 for 13 from 3, and 18 for 20 from the free throw line. Along with this amazing scoring performance, Bryant would also grab 6 rebounds and dish out 2 assists. While Bryant didn't end up breaking the 100-point mark set by Wilt Chamberlain and did have a three-point line, many still consider this to be more impressive of a scoring outburst. While the 81-point mark will be much more achievable to surpass than Wilt's 100-point game, there is still a chance that we might never see another player in history break this record. Arguably, the most impressive thing about this performance is the circumstances that he did it in. The Lakers finished the game with only 122 points, meaning that Bryant accounted for over 66% of the team's total points. Along with this era of the NBA was heavily focused on an isolation style of play on the offensive end, and also an emphasis on deep two-point shots. As we know now, due to the revolution and implementation of analytics in the league, this is one of the most inefficient shots in the game. Despite this, Bryant proved why he is widely regarded as one of the best scorers of all time and had one of the most impressive games in the history of the NBA. The next insane single-game performance from an NBA legend on this list comes from another Los Angeles Lakers player on the biggest stage of them all. Elgin Baylor was one of the best scorers of his generation. He was drafted actually 2 times by the Minneapolis Lakers, once in 1956 and once in 1958. In his 14 years in the league, he would make the All-Star game 11 times, the All-NBA team 10 times, and won the 1958-59 Rookie of the Year award. On April 14, 1962, Los Angeles Lakers would take on the Boston Celtics in Game 5 of the 1962 NBA Finals. Baylor would finish the game with a remarkable 61 points and 22 rebounds. Arguably the most impressive thing about this performance is that Baylor was able to achieve this remarkable points total while being guarded by Tom "Snatch" Sanders. At the time, Sanders was considered to be one of the top defenders in the entire NBA. Along with this, the Celtics had one of the best big men and interior defenders of all time on their roster for this game in Bill Russell. Even if Baylor was able to shake past Sanders, he was still forced to try and get a shot off around Russell. The Lakers won this game by a final score of 126 to 121. After the game, Baylor was quoted as saying, "All I remember is that we won the game. I never thought about how many points I had." After Baylor's generational performance, even his opponents could not help from giving him his flowers. Sanders was quoted as saying, "Elgin was just a machine in that game." At the time of this performance, it was the most points that was ever scored in a postseason game until Michael Jordan would break the record with his 63-point outburst against the Boston Celtics in the 1986 playoffs. Up next is another incredible single-game performance, this time coming from one of Baylor's opponents in his 61-point scoring outburst, one of the greatest big men that the NBA has ever seen. Bill Russell is one of the greatest players to ever touch an NBA floor. He was the second overall pick in the 1956 NBA draft by the St. Louis Hawks, and then immediately traded to the Boston Celtics for Ed Macauley and Cliff Hagan. In his 13 seasons in the league, Russell would make the All-Star game 12 times, the All-NBA team 11 times, won All-Defensive team, won 5 MVPs, 11 NBA titles, and led the league in rebounding 4 times. Russell was one of the greatest rebounders of all time. At the time of his retirement, he averaged 22.5 rebounds per game while only averaging 15.1 points per game. Despite this, he would nearly double his career averages in both statistical categories in Game 7 of the 1962 NBA Finals. The game would be between Russell's Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers. Russell and the Celtics had their backs up against the wall in a win-or-go-home situation on the biggest stage in the league. Russell would show up when the game mattered most and have arguably the most impressive performance in a Game 7 in the finals in NBA history. He finished the game with a remarkable 30 points and 40 rebounds. The Celtics would go on to win the game, and Russell would win the 4th of his eventual 11 NBA titles. The next single game performance on this list is arguably the most impressive game that a player has ever had. While David Robinson came nowhere close to eclipsing Wilt's 100 points or even Kobe's 81, his performance on February 17, 1994 against the Detroit Pistons is arguably the most impressive single game outburst on this list. Robinson was the first overall pick of the 1987 NBA draft by the San Antonio Spurs. In his 14 years in the league, he would make the All-Star game 10 times, the All-NBA team 10 times, the All-Defensive team 8 times, won 1 MVP, 1 Defensive Player of the Year award, the 1989-90 Rookie of the Year award, 2 NBA titles, led the league in scoring once, rebounding once, and blocks once. Despite not having much of an outside game and playing the role of a traditional center, Robinson was still very versatile for a big man, especially in his era. He would put this on full display against the Pistons, where he finished the game with a remarkable 34 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists, and 10 blocks. This would be the 4th quadruple-double in NBA history, the other 3 coming from Nate Thurmond, Alvin Robertson, and Hakeem Olajuwon. Since Robinson achieved this historic feat, no player in the NBA has been able to replicate it, and it could be a very long time before the historic quadruple-double ever occurs again. The next player on this list was arguably the most dominant player in the history of the NBA, and he would come very close to becoming the 5th player of all time to record a quadruple-double. Shaquille O'Neal has a strong case for being the most dominant player of all time. He stood at 7'1" and weighed in at 325 pounds. Despite his immense size, Shaq was still very athletic for a big man in his era. He was selected with the 1st overall pick of the 1992 NBA draft by the Orlando Magic. In his 19 years in the league, he was named to the All-Star game 15 times, the All-NBA team 14 times, the All-Defensive team 3 times, won 4 NBA titles, 3 Finals MVPs, 1 MVP, the 1992-93 Rookie of the Year award, and led the league in scoring twice. Despite O'Neal not being much of a passer in his career, averaging only 2.5 assists per game, he would nearly become the only player in NBA history record a quadruple-double in the NBA Finals. On June 8th, 2001, the Los Angeles Lakers would take on the Philadelphia 76ers in Game 2 of the 2001 NBA Finals. He would finish the game with an astounding 28 points, 20 rebounds, 9 assists, and 8 blocks. Shaq would come painfully close to achieving the historic quadruple-double, coming just 1 assist and 2 blocks short. This game would come right after the Lakers took a shocking loss in Game 1 of the series. It was clear that O'Neal was not going to let that happen again, and the Lakers would win the series and in turn the NBA title in just 5 games. Despite coming just short of the quadruple-double, this would still be one of the strongest single-game performances in the history of the final. The next player on our list would carry his team past one of the strongest rosters in the league at the time. LeBron James is set to enter his 21st year in the league in the 2023-24 season. He was the first overall pick in the 2003 NBA draft by the Cleveland Cavaliers. Throughout the first 2 decades of his professional career, James has made 19 All-Star teams, 19 All-NBA teams, 6 All-Defensive teams, won 4 NBA titles, 4 Finals MVPs, 4 MVPs, the 2003-2004 Rookie of the Year award, led the league in scoring once and assist once. Arguably the strongest single-game performance of his illustrious postseason career came on May 31st, 2007 in Game 6 between the Cleveland Cavaliers and Detroit Pistons. James would finish the game with a remarkable 48 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, and 2 steals. This would set a career high for him at the time in single-game postseason scoring. Arguably the most impressive thing about the entire performance is that James scored the final 25 points that the Cavaliers scored in the game and 29 of the team's final 30 points. He would also nearly score half of the team's total points in the game, with the second leading scorer on the team being Zydrunas Ilgauskas scoring just 16 points. After the historic performance, James was quoted as saying, "I'm banged up, I'm winded, I'm fatigued, I've got all day tomorrow. It's going to be tough to get some rest when you got a crazy 2-year-old running around the house. So hopefully I can take him to one of his grandma's house." When asked about the performance itself, he said, "Why should I be surprised? I was making a lot of great moves. They are definitely a great defensive team, but I was determined to attack. I was able to will my team to victory. This is definitely a big win, one of the biggest wins in Cavaliers franchise history. For me and my teammates, it's definitely the biggest win. We have a goal. We can't dwell on this when we have another game on Saturday. We've got to do our best to win that ball game and get where we wanted to be all year." This was such an awe-inspiring game that even James's opponents on the Pistons were forced to give him credit for torching them. Pistons then head coach Flip Saunders said, "We tried to trap him and get it out of his hands, but he attacked. We'll definitely have to do something different next time." Pistons point guard Chauncey Billups was quoted as saying, "We threw everything we had at him. We just couldn't stop him. It's frustrating. He put on an unbelievable display out there. It's probably the best I have seen against us ever in the playoffs." James was able to pull out another win to take down the Pistons and advance to the 2007 NBA Finals, take on the San Antonio Spurs. But the lack of help around James was put on full display and the Cavs would lose the series in just 4 games. What if I told you that one of the best games from arguably the best point guard of all time came in a game that he played the center position? Magic Johnson was a generational talent and one of the best players to ever spend time in the NBA. He was the first overall pick in the 1979 NBA draft by the Los Angeles Lakers. Through his 13 years in the NBA, Johnson made 12 All-Star appearances, 10 All-NBA appearances, won 5 NBA titles, 3 Finals MVPs, 3 MVPs, led the league in assists 4 times and steals 2 times. Despite being regarded by some as the best point guard of all time, arguably the most impressive single-game performance from Johnson's illustrious career came in one of the few games that he played the center position. Potentially the most impressive fact about this game is that Johnson accomplished what he did as a rookie. In Game 6 of the 1980 NBA Finals, Johnson and the Los Angeles Lakers took on the Philadelphia 76ers. At the time, Philadelphia would have Darryl Dawkins, an elite player in his own right at the center position. With the Lakers missing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, they turned to their rookie point guard to fill in for him. While most point guards would be unable to play the center spot, Johnson was standing at 6'9", so he had the size to make it work while still being considerably smaller than Dawkins. Johnson would finish the game with a remarkable 42 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals, and 1 block. The Lakers would win the game by a final score of 123 to 107, and Johnson would be named as the finals MVP. In an appearance on the All the Smoke podcast, Johnson recounted the historic performance and what led up to it, saying, "Everybody's head is down because Kareem can't play." I said, "So what if Kareem can't play? We're still gonna win." And they looked at me like, "Rookie, go sit down. We can't beat Philadelphia without Kareem." So I said, "I gotta do something to get these guys going." I asked the flight attendant if I can go on the plane first. So I went and sat in Kareem's seats. And as every Laker came by, I said, "Never fear, Magic is here." The unmatched confidence from Johnson led to one of the greatest single game performances in NBA history. And if he wouldn't have stepped up and filled in for Kareem, there is a strong chance that the Lakers would have ended up blowing the 3-2 series lead that they held. Now, I know I didn't cover every NBA legend's best game in this video, so if you want to see somebody else in part 2, just let me know in the comments section down below.